Hello, my name is Felix Jones, and once again, I'm suffering from a movie hangover. Hey, guess what? I think that monogamy, in the sense of pledging your life to one person and promising only to love and ever be attracted to one person, and treating love as if it's basically on and off situation where you're either totally in or you're totally out, as if there isn't a huge spectrum of ways that you can love somebody in between nothing and a full immersive romantic love, is a massive illusion, an oversimplification that's basically been created by a society that was founded upon religious doctrine and patriarchal ideas of ownership over women, which has since been compounded by a ceremony which relies upon societal pressure with the public display of your love, and has been further compounded by the ceremony and system which was only originally designed in order to keep people politically and financially stable. I have two official partners, and don't worry, this video isn't how they're finally out about that fact. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a few portrayals of polyamory, or consensual non-monogamy, in fiction from the 1930s to the present day. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time to watch every single movie and TV show on the subject ever made.
I mean, you can't love two people at once.
Yes, you can.
Of course you can.
No, sure, obviously you can, but you don't. You work out who you like best and then you pretend not to like anyone else.
However, I've picked a few of my favourite ones, and it's a subject that I will probably come back to in time. Besides, these movies have given me plenty to chew on already. We're going to cover Design for Living, 1933, Bonheur, 1965, Paint Your Wagon, 69, Her, 2012, and a very special and very new film that I can't wait to talk about. I am also particularly keen to find examples in the media of polyamory being portrayed positively, when we already have so many incredibly popular portrayals of how to be incredibly horrible in a monogamous relationship. So basically I'm going to go through all of these movies. I'm going to talk about the positive ways that they portray different ideas from monogamy to polyamory everywhere on that spectrum, and then I'm going to summarize all the themes together at the end. So let's get going. Design for Living. This movie was written by Noel Coward, famous writer of Brief Encounter and famously gay man from when homosexuality was illegal in the UK. It tells the story of two young creatives sick of two-facedness in popular society, who seek something more real by facing the harsh realities of their competing affections for the same woman, and tells the story of how the trio come to realise that they are comfortable with them all existing simultaneously. There's not actually that much to the story apart from that and the heartbreak that it takes for them to get to that eventuality. The trio start setting up contracts of behaviour in order to incorporate each other's love into their lives, and they fail to uphold them, causing heartbreak and pain where it could easily be avoided with sincerity. Rather than confess to Tom that Gilda and George won't be able to keep away from each other whilst he is away, they spring it on him after the fact. To be honest, it's really nuts that it's a surprise to some people to realise the idea that it would probably hurt less to cheat on somebody if you were to tell them about it first and make sure they were okay with it beforehand. And yes, I know what you're thinking, polyamory would indeed solve basically any problem that ever crops up in any drama movie. It is telling for the era that the actual polyamorous aspect of the relationship is basically saved for the last 10 seconds of the film. And obviously you can understand why they would want to keep it vague, given that they wanted it to be acceptable to a mainstream audience at the time. But there are actually lots of little hints of the true nature of the polyamorous relationship that they share, sprinkled coyly throughout the film. There are also many very prescient notes of how polyamory is handled today in films and real life. It is the first example of a scene common to every one of these films, the contract negotiation scene. This is easily the best part of any of these films for me. The graphic depiction of people having to come to terms with their taut romantic ideas and consider what's really valuable for them. And if you live in Western society, basically every polyamorous person has to go through this at some point in their lives. And I think every monogamous person should as well, considering what the right style of relationship is for them, where they find their value in the style of relationship that they choose, why it's important that they have it one way or the other to them. And it's always this beautiful, painful moment of realization of the possibilities that people can have, and a testament to what people can achieve in their relationships when they bring this human capacity for sincerity and really good communication in contact with the more irrational, the more human, naturally human capacity for love and desire of multiple people that is not limited solely because you tell yourself that this is one particular way that society is meant to be. And there is always going to be a painful transition from monogamy to polyamory, monogamy being implicitly possessive, and polyamory being this point of loss of control. But it does serve to preserve many relationships that otherwise would end, only because social tradition tells us that we can't possibly have a relationship with somebody who isn't ready to pledge their entire lives to us. There's this really great quote by A.C. Grayling.
But the truism that people change over time is so often forgotten in relationships that failure, if it happens, comes as a surprise to the parties, who have missed their opportunities to renegotiate the old contract when new compromises were needed.
That is one good quote. In the film, they talk about their communication like a disarmament agreement.
Let's talk it over from every angle without any excitement. Like a disarmament conference.
Implying that their desire for indulgence can only really be fulfilled by first setting aside their more violent passions in order to communicate clearly their desires in the relationship. A philosophy that I think any polyamorous person sick to death of their life being bogged down by relationship drama is likely to support. Interestingly, they reference even in this early film philandering as a typically male idea.
A thing happened to me that usually happens to men. You see, a man can meet 2, 3, or even 4 women and fall in love with all of them. And then by a process of interesting elimination, he's able to decide which one he prefers. But a woman must decide purely on instinct, guesswork, if she wants to be considered nice. Oh, it's quite all right for her to try on 100 hats before she picks one out.
This is backed up by the fact that the majority of infidelity cases in reality are indeed against men, but it's also a reference to this popularly discussed idea that perhaps society encourages men to cheat by normalizing this possessive nature over their partner, or indeed by making them think that the only options that they ever have are to cheat or end a relationship. Something that we're going to see portrayed a lot more clearly in the next film. Le Bonheur. The real beauty of this film is that it is actually a great tragedy. The film is colourful and rich with a joie de vivre that one can easily imagine being implicit in a polyamorous lifestyle. To quote the ethical slut,
"We hate boredom. We are people who are greedy to experience all that life has to offer, and also generous in sharing what we have to offer to others. We are the good times had by all."
Le Bonheur largely tells the story of a very unfortunate and almost entirely non-consensual polyamorous relationship, aka cheating, that almost becomes a beautiful story of polyamory with a messy start, but then unfortunately becomes instead really just messy. Spoiler warning ahead of time, jump to here if you don't want to see. Following a beautiful profession from the husband of his extramarital relationship, to which the wife responds positively, and we find ourselves in such a gorgeous moment of natural beauty and relief with the honesty that this husband is sharing, the wife immediately drowns in a nearby lake whilst the husband takes a nap. The most agonizing part of this is that we never find out as an audience whether or not the death was intentional. And just like the characters, just like the entire moral stance of the film, we as the audience are forced to interpret what we think happened, what we think of the things that took place in this, where we morally judge all of these things. Because the film could be interpreted in so many different ways. It could be seen as just this terrible natural tragedy about a horrible, unfortunate accident that happened right at the beginning of a really wonderful new relationship. It could be seen as this damning condemnation of polyamory as a very concept, destroying families. Or, indeed, it could just be a cautionary tale on the potential fallout of insincerity. For even if the death was an accident, the shame following it is born of societal pressure. The idea that society will never understand what happened, and never understand that his wife might have been okay with the idea of him having another partner whilst they'd actually been together. Forcing the new partner into a monogamous role, and to avoid ever admitting publicly to her presence in the relationship prior to the death. What could have been an honest love becomes a permanent subterfuge. Nevertheless, the film does contain many positive portrayals of polyamorous ideas, which I will discuss later on in the review. Paint Your Wagon, 1969. Okay, first off, yes, I do know what the majority of viewers are thinking about when I mention the title of this film.
Gonna paint our wagon, gonna paint it good. They're singing, Marge. Why aren't they killing each other?
Yeah, their guns are right there.
Indeed, I love The Simpsons, but that joke can go straight to hell in my opinion. The reason why this film is so good is because of the contrast in tone. Where else would you hope to find a film in which tarred man, leather-skinned Clint Eastwood is singing? That's worth the ticket price alone. And if it's violence you're looking for, the film has its fair share. If you're looking for moral corruption, the film has it in abundance. Take, for example, this merry little ditty about kidnapping a group of French women to force them into prostitution. And what's more, the film is really funny and very dark from the first few minutes alone.
They better be, 'cause I'm gonna bury 'em!
But that's not actually why I'm here. I'm actually a big fan of Western films myself and a big fan of musicals, and I think the film makes for really good watching in general. But though I would admit that some of the songs do drag a bit. The film has a great colour palette, really enjoyable performances, and some of the lines are so witty and well delivered, they trump any Western I have ever seen and move on to the point of Marx Brothers-esque wit.
You should read the Bible, Mr. Rumson.
I have read the Bible, Mrs. Fanny.
Didn't that discourage you about drinking?
No, but it sure killed my appetite for reading.
Clint Eastwood's character is literally referred to as partner throughout the duration of this film, even by his own wife. That kind of gives you the idea of the kind of weird fun that this film is having. The film was written at the end of the 1960s by a radical liberal with a chip on his shoulder, and yet, unfortunately, the film seems to ultimately revert to Christian doctrine and values as being right and good. Again, probably due to the era and desiring for the film to still make it into the mainstream. A woman with Christian convictions is described as a
Genuine, good woman.
despite all signs otherwise pointing to people being much happier, liberated of unbending, one-size-fits-all ideals. The film tells a genuinely fascinating story about the blossoming and tragic crumbling of a polyamorous relationship. The film opens with a town being formed populated solely by working men, and the forming of a partnership.
The one sacred thing, even to low scuff like me, is a man's partner.
Honestly, this film could not be more on the nose. Between two men, Ben Rumson and Clint Eastwood's partner, they form this partnership based upon very clearly communicated needs and expectations of each other, a fully understood relationship contract.
Well, when I get dead drunk, fall on a muddy street, I expect you to come get me. If I owe a man $100, I expect you to stand good for me. And if I get melancholy, which can happen, I expect you to be my companion and to solace me.
Like many a Western film, there is a focus on the theme of restriction coming with the dominating law killing the Wild West.
Didn't expect to find any fences around here.
Fencing off land and claiming ownership over nature.
It's the golden country, untouched and uncontaminated by human hands.
This also feeds into the sense of oppression on the polyamorous relationship coming from dominating religious doctrine. The first encounter with non-monogamy is through a Mormon trio who visit the town.
I thought that one was your wife.
They both are.
Holy Moses, they're Mormons!
In the Mormon example, there is shown a sense of comfort between wives, able to exchange breastfeeding duties, both acting as mother to one child. This establishes, early on in the film, this idea of a sort of cooperative sense of community between multiple partners, forming a kind of working family, which is a much more refreshing take than the usual sense of competition that one would expect in that situation. This could be seen as a model for the cooperation and tolerance of compromise between Ben and partner later on in the film. Furthermore, this whole thing feeds into an idea of the philosophical freedom that comes with letting go of possessiveness of people and, in particular, of partners and children, something that has been discussed as early on as Plato's Republic and, of course, Buddhism. So Ben ends up purchasing one of the Mormon's wives, Elizabeth, consentingly, and they are married monogamously. But it is Ben's possessiveness and jealousy that originally upsets his marriage, as he is unable to escape the fear of his wife committing an infidelity, and then leads him to encourage the whole town in pursuing endless indulgence and forced prostitution.
Oh, pretty soon there'd be another saloon.
And another body house.
And another gambling
And
hall.
another body house.
And another hotel.
And another body house.
Fulfilling the needs for indulgence and ownership within every single individual in the town, as opposed to Ben questioning his own possessiveness over his wife as a person. His rampant jealousy is described as a form of lunacy.
Ever since he became a lunatic. Well, if I hang around here long enough watching you and her together, I'll become as big a lunatic as you are.
And partner, by the end of the film, rules that greed, the byproduct of possessiveness and jealousy, is the crux of the problems of the whole town.
Gold fever.
Early on in the film, partner falls in love with Elizabeth and decides to leave town. But together, encouraged by the Mormon model, The three realise there is no decent reason why they can't be together.
Well, why?
You explain it to her. Where you been?
I'd like to oblige, partner, but I'll be damned if I can think of a reason.
Again, the contract negotiation scene. This is likely the funniest of any of these examples, having to be done over a bottle of whiskey and with a lot of hating on religious tradition.
And you don't have to please anybody. And you don't have to love thy neighbor. You leave the bastard alone.
At the same time as their relationship blossoms, the town crumbles into disorganized hedonism. The trio live peacefully, largely separate from this, but are seen to be symptomatic of it by the religious fanatics that visit town.
Morning, Miss Rumson. How are your husbands?
They're fine, thank you, Mr. Atwell.
Husbands? Did I hear husbands? You animals!
And this idea, unfortunately, eventually infects Elizabeth.
Well, if this is the only place we can live, then we're ugly too.
Eventually, the relationship crumbles as partner professes a preference for monogamy, implying the union of the three isn't real.
You and I were like a real husband and wife. I couldn't live with you any other way.
In truth, the desire for the stability of a monogamous relationship is an entirely sound one, but it does come at the potential cost of forcing your other partner to relinquish or deny their love for another person, which is all well and good as a noble sacrifice to make in the name of monogamy, but when it comes to the point of proper insincerity between you and your partner, does it not just render the entire relationship hollow? With the one partner loving this abstract version of their partner who would never look at another man who doesn't really exist. Ultimately, with no other examples of healthy polyamory promoted in their society, and a prevailing religious consensus as the only alternative shown to total greed and corruption, the trio resolve that they cannot function in any society that has a claim to a moral backbone, despite the only moral backbone they recognize being outdated Christian ideals. Even though before that, the only response that they had to why they couldn't function as a trio in regular society was,
why not?
In a world that did not openly despise their union and was capable of minding its own damn business and having a moral backbone of its own that it didn't need to force onto other people, they may have been able to live happily together. The comfort and equality of the relationship is seen in how they treat each other as equals, even if the whole thing is being backed by an implicit talking down to the wife. Polyamory doesn't solve every problem a relationship or society could have. Elizabeth is still self-assertive from the beginning, starting out her part in the marriage, like Ben and partner, briefing the rules, her desires, the compromises she is willing to make for the marriage.
All I want is your name, Mr. Rumson, and the least measure of respect due to a man's wife. Most of all, I want you to build me a cabin.
And all at the point of a gun. And if I might add, also looking sexy as all hell at the same time.
I admire your pioneer spirit and your straightforward manner, man.
Is that what you've been admiring?
Just showing that if you can't get a guy to respect you morally, you can always remove his physical dominance. God, what a great film. And now, unfortunately, it's time to move on from the wonderful, colourful gorgeousness of the 60s and leap forwards a lot closer to the present day. Let's go. Her, 2012. This film I will only mention briefly as it does not focus on polyamory, but instead every type of love. Famous for being that movie about a dude that falls in love with his computer, Her has recently become one of my favourite films. It is so dense and endlessly watchable, and every last scene is full of metaphors about love and society and the modern world, while still being capable of watching it as this kind of quite light-hearted, contemplative film. Again, spoiler warning, here's the timecode. The film features a reveal that Samantha, Theodore's partner and operating system, is taking part in possibly the largest polyamorous relationship in history.
How many others?
641.
Theodore is not ready to understand it, but it brings up the impropriety of Theodore's possessiveness when Samantha is genuinely capable of loving him only more with the freedom to love others simultaneously.
This doesn't make me love you any less. It actually makes me love you more.
That doesn't make any sense.
This is another tragic tale of deception. In truth, Theodore never actually states to Samantha that their relationship has to be exclusive, and in reality, this is the kind of thing that some partners would use as an excuse for infidelity.
What did you do, you stupid prick?
I'm sorry, baby. I didn't
didn't know we were exclusive and she had massive tits.
However, this is only a reflection of how easy it can be for couples to have a presumed relationship contract that they never fully discuss, which leads to endless quarrels about the propriety of everything from cheating to flirting to just looking at other people. Indeed, I do think that this communication ethos of dissecting the relationship contract should be ubiquitous to all relationships and not just to polyamory. Anyway, that's Her. It's an amazing movie. Give it a watch. Next film. Finally, we come right up close to the modern day, and half the reason I'm actually doing this review right now. 4 years ago, this really gorgeous movie came out. It was based around the real-life origin story of one of history's most popular comic book characters, who simultaneously just released the best, or rather debatably only decent DC movie to date. This film did a lot to imitate the advertising art style, was genuinely very well written, with some stellar performances. And yet it only made $2 million at the box office, which I know may sound like a lot of money, but in terms of filmmaking, it is absolutely nothing. It's zip, and I just can't imagine anything more outrageous than that. And I don't mean to big up this film just because it's about polyamory. Yes, there is something more touching to me about films that tackle the subject, because I know that it's one that's potentially fraught with problems, and seeing movies that do it well, with the sense of sincerity, embracing the idea lovingly, without laughing at it, without fetishizing it, makes them remarkable to me. But this film is a really good story, and it deserves better than it got by far. I will grant the advertising of a biopic about a struggling creative is hardly new or engaging. Especially adding a sexual twist with the theme of bondage in a jaded post-50 Shades world.
I'm 37, I like bondage sex. I had a mask on and some jam went on me. Did it?
Doesn't exactly pique one's interest, I know. But then, when somebody tries really hard to make a film that tackles a very difficult subject matter, and they actually do well at it, and try to make a genuine positive difference, and nobody notices, in the same year as The Greatest Showman gets released, that is a real fucking tragedy. The film centers around the true story of Dr. William Marston, creator of the character of Wonder Woman, who had a polyamorous relationship with 2 or even 3 women over the course of his life. They all lived together and raised a family together, with both Elizabeth and Olive Byrne, his wife and partner respectively, both giving birth to children of Marston's. When Marston died of lung cancer, Elizabeth and Olive stayed together until Olive died in her 80s. Not much else is known about the relationship in reality, so a lot of the film's narrative is largely speculative. But unlike, say for instance, The Greatest Showman, the truth of the matter isn't really relevant, because the only impact that this film could possibly have is one of genuine acceptance. The film tells the story of the forming of the polyamorous relationship, its struggles against society, and how it came to inspire Wonder Woman as a character and source of inspiration to women. This film is a lot more directly interrogative than any of the other examples.
Are you normal? What is normal?
This is typical, again, of an age that is filled with movies which are about breaking the mold and overcoming oppression. However, even in the context of these other films, it is still very welcome, because they are asking questions that were asked before, but we still haven't popularly come to an answer to yet.
What we want can never happen. Why not?
Marston, as the male in this traditional relationship, is forced to give up dominance in order to communicate as equals with his partners, which is a reflection of his real-life ideas.
How did it make you feel?
I'm the one asking the questions.
Oh, why should that be?
A person is most happy when they are submissive to a loving authority.
It is also definitely worthy of note that this movie, a biopic, seems to fall alongside the very minimal number of films from the last 10 years featuring polyamory, a large amount of which are documentaries or life pieces. Implying that it was only possible to portray such ideas in straight fiction in the more utopian idealist world of the 1960s, and that now it would be a harder pill to swallow, that it would be immediately dismissed as being unrealistic. There's an implication that people won't believe that polyamory can exist unless they're shown how it's already going on. The strongest moment in the film has to be when the characters temporarily consider giving up the relationship for the sake of a quiet life for their children. Again, spoilers.
Are you blaming me for what happened? They had no right to...
No, they did. They have every right.
A very troubling debate that must go on in the minds of polyamorous people very commonly, and the film gives a damned good answer to go with it.
Our kids don't deserve to be attacked, to be ostracized.
Our children are inheriting your shame. Is that how you want them to live? Is that the lesson you want to teach them?
Finally, it is also worthy of mention in this film that the actors who they choose to portray the characters from the real-life situation are obviously much more Hollywood glamorous and gorgeous. But these are separate issues that need to be solved in their own time, in their own way. I am actually still proud to own a copy of this film. I think it's a really solid-ass movie. I think that you can get a copy for guaranteed basically nothing, and I strongly recommend you doing so. Now, let's sum up. The running themes! There are many fantastically interesting running themes through all of these movies about polyamory, least of all which being a very curious, ubiquitous choice of very indulgent, very rich, very, very sexy colour palettes. Both Paint Your Wagon and Bonheur feature themes of a desire to return to nature. All of the films are riddled with snappy, witty dialogue.
Would you care to hit me? Please help yourself.
Sorry, I'm too high class.
I'm your wife, not your jailer.
They civilize what's pretty by putting up a city where nothing that's pretty can grow.
I think anybody who falls in love is a freak. It's a crazy thing to do. It's kind of like a form of socially acceptable insanity.
Only to be expected when dealing with characters who are ready to analyse their own emotions and realities. One of the best themes to see is the portrayal of kitchen table polyamory. Portrayed in Design for Living and Paint Your Wagon, by communicating their respective positions in the relationship, the trios achieve domestic comfort, usually only thought to be idealised and sought out by the traditional nuclear family. The compromise and communication implied in Paint Your Wagon is genuinely heartwarming, as their arrangement is clearly laid out with the men taking turns to share the marital bed with their wife.
I sure am one tired man tonight.
You was playing poker last night?
Yeah, I was playing poker last night. And you was tired, remember?
Oh, well.
This is also reflected in how they communicate over the table, with the camera taking turns to show them in pairs to reflect how they support each other in turn in their debates. Bonheur and Her share a great theme of embracing the concept of boundless love, not undervaluing what each individual love means, that it can exist just as strongly as in any monogamous relationship.
C'est comme si j'avais 10 bras pour t'embrasser. Et toi 10 bras pour moi. On est tout mêlés, tu comprends? C'est comme si des bras m'étaient poussés en plus, en dehors de nous.
But the heart's not like a box that gets filled up. It expands in size the more you love.
The fear preventing the acceptance of this idea, as discussed in The Ethical Slut, is thought to be born of a kind of resource scarcity that really shouldn't be applied to human beings, and certainly shouldn't be applied to concepts of subjective value or affection. Usually we don't try to quantify and measure how much somebody loves someone by how much they're willing to do for them, nor do we think that by loving, say, for instance, multiple television series, that means that you love them less than if you were to only like the one.
You see, in my family, we have a child who I love completely with all my heart. If we had 2 children, I would love them both completely with all my heart. That is magic math.
Funnily enough, both films also share references to the long-term nature of love as something that stays permanently with you, even past death.
I'll always love you because we grew up together. You help make me who I am. Whatever someone you become, wherever you are in the world, I'm sending you love.
Les vieux, c'est pareil. Mon père, quand il est mort, je l'aimais. Puis je l'oubliais un peu, je ne pense pas tellement à lui. Mais je l'aime, il est là, ça continue.
An idea that transcends the usual binary perception of monogamous relationships, always being on or off, all in or all out. The only pains in these films ever seen are in deception and breaking of contracts. This is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, an issue that arises in real-life relationships all the time. However, the answer is revealed, again in all of these films, to be forgiveness and openness to adjustment of the contract to suit the individual members of the relationship. Focusing on what makes them all individually, personally happy, as opposed to being what fits in best with taught traditional relationship norms. The relationships are only about the people within them, and not about something larger than themselves. Another less desired running theme is characters delineating the differences between their respective loves by illustrating their individual differing qualities. In Design for Living as Hats...
You see, George, you're sort of like a ragged straw hat with a very soft lining. And you, Tom, chic, piquant, perched over one eye.
In Bonheur as Flowers.
Toi, tu es comme un animal en liberté.
A rather confusing idea, as it implies that there are lacking qualities in each of the two partners. Yet more unfortunately, in the Wonder Women, Marston implies that together his partners make the perfect woman.
She is beautiful, guileless, kind, pure of heart. And you are brilliant, ferocious, hilarious. Together you are the perfect woman.
Implying that separated they would be worth less to him, and that only when brought collectively together they create enough. I preferred this quote from the Louis Theroux documentary.
Why aren't we enough for each other is a horrible sentence.
In my opinion, love is probably best treated as not being quantifiable nor being hierarchical, because even though it makes sense that we receive different things from our different partners, just as we do with our family and friends, I still don't think it's healthy or positive to rank those people on some kind of scale, as if any human life is more valuable than another, even subjectively speaking. Because even in the face of the idea of love being this kind of symptom of symbiotic needs being fulfilled between two people, to measure how valuable a person is based on what they give to you is indisputably transactional, which can make sense to help you realize whether or not a relationship is working fairly for you, but not to work out whether or not you're in love with someone. In fact, though I'm not doing TV in this episode, this Louis Theroux documentary episode is so brilliantly telling on how polyamory is regarded by popular culture. Shown for the most part to be perfectly happy, these people are portrayed with relationships that don't require the approval of the outside world, needing only the approval of those involved in the relationship. Louis comes in with his usual antagonistic questions, and these people reveal not only to have all the answers, but they thought about them 5 years ago.
You're engaged. Is that appropriate? Did you see that, Jerry?
I did.
A man was hugging your wife. Why aren't you enough for each other? Are they laughing at us? It's nothing more annoying than other people having fun. I wonder if Jerry knows what he's missing out on. You feel your needs are being met. You're doing a film about polyamory and you're worried about being judged about boxes.
Louis asks these questions which are loaded with ideas of possession and quantifying love using words like enough and share, and he's shown to actually be the one who's behind in the game because he's asking these questions that are loaded with an idea of normality that just doesn't apply to these people. And instead he tries to pin it on things like mental illness, which is really low.
And you said you get anxiety as well.
Yeah.
Are you medicated for that?
Yes.
You know, there should really be more documentaries like this for people in monogamous relationships. Today I'm visiting Carol and Ben, who say they want to live a life where they are exclusive to only one other partner. And they say that jealousy is a very healthy aspect of a relationship. So, human beings are supposed to live in groups of 150 people, but you guys have decided to lock yourselves in the house together every night and unload all your problems on each other. Does that not sound a bit weird? Bit, like hell? So you're going to get married into an institution where you give all of your money to people who just happen to share your name, despite the fact that there are people starving in the world right now who are just equally important. I mean, does that not sound a bit weird, like you're building an evil empire or something? So there we are, some of my favourite films about polyamory and some of the best ideas that they contemplate. Maybe check them out for yourself, see what you think. You don't have to be polyamorous to like them, just as you don't have to be gay to like Brokeback Mountain. And you just might end up learning about how other people live their lives and realising how easy it can be to question your own fundamental ideas. For my own money, these films remind me of my capacity to love ad infinitum. With the belief that all human beings are objectively equal, I think that all people are worthy of love, and the only thing that separates us is our individual experiences of the world and how they mark us and change our characters. And I think it was Plato who really opened my eyes to this idea first, like introducing the concept of love being the first step on a ladder towards being capable of loving all people and all of reality, and as aspects of the same gorgeous universe. And I really do think that that is something that we can all share in and contemplate together. And I'd really like to finish off this review by reading you a quote from Erich Fromm, the author of The Art of Loving. So I'm just going to say first, my name's Felix Jones, and thank you for watching. If you really enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. And here we go, Erich Fromm. Love of one person implies love of man as such. The kind of division of labour by which one loves one's family, but is without feeling for the stranger, is the sign of a basic inability to love. Love of man is not, as is frequently supposed, an abstraction coming after the love for a specific person, but it is its premise. Thank you for watching. See you next time.